My sister skipped my wedding for a Europe trip. 3 days later, she was screaming at my door. I got married without my sister there. That sentence still feels heavy when I say it out loud. Not because she couldn't come, but because she chose not to. She told me weeks before the wedding that she wouldn't make it, her voice calm, almost cheerful. She said she was flying to Europe instead. A trip she'd planned for herself. Like my wedding was just another date on the calendar she could cross out. I remember standing there in my dress, smiling so hard my cheeks hurt. People kept asking where she was. I kept giving the same answer. She's busy. I said it like it didn't matter, like it didn't sting, like my only sister wasn't missing the biggest day of my life on purpose. Inside, though, my chest felt tight. Every song, every toast, every laugh reminded me she wasn't there. And I hated myself for caring so much. I told myself not to ruin my own wedding with those thoughts. I told myself families aren't perfect. I told myself she'd call later. Maybe she'd surprise me. Maybe I was overreacting. I kept swallowing the hurt and pushing it down, the way I always had with her. 3 days later, I was still riding that strange post-wedding quiet. My husband had stepped out, and I was alone in the apartment, finally breathing. Then I heard it. Loud banging. Not polite knocking. Not a doorbell. Someone was pounding on my door like something was wrong, like someone was hurt. Then I heard screaming. My name, over and over, angry, desperate, out of control. My stomach dropped. My hands started shaking as I walked toward the door. And when I opened it, there she was, my sister, standing right in front of me, furious, shaking, demanding I fix something she said I had no right to touch. That's when it hit me. She didn't miss my wedding by accident. And this wasn't about love at all. We grew up in Boston, just the two of us trying to make sense of a world that took too much from us too early. Our parents died 5 years ago, close enough together that it still feels unreal when I say it. Our grandmother died when I was 3. My sister wasn't even born yet. By the time she came into this world, it was already smaller, quieter, and missing people we should have grown up knowing. I was the older sister, the one everyone leaned on. I learned early how to be responsible, how to stay calm, how to do what needed to be done even when it hurt. I went into health administration because I liked structure. I liked knowing I could help people and still have stability. My sister was the opposite. She chased excitement, big ideas, big dreams. She worked at a marketing firm, always talking about brands, campaigns, and moving up fast. We were different in almost every way. Different opinions, different goals, different ways of seeing the world. We argued a lot growing up, sometimes over stupid things, sometimes over things that really mattered. But I always believed one thing deep down, that no matter how different we didn't hate each other. That underneath all of it, we were still sisters. After our parents died, life changed fast. The apartment in Boston was in my name, passed down from our grandmother through a trust. My mother had always been clear with me. She said, "It's legally yours, but it belongs to both of you." And I believed that. I lived by that. I never questioned it. When it came to the trust fund money, I split it evenly. No hesitation, no paperwork drama, just equal, because that's what family does. At least that's what I thought. We lived together for years. Then my sister moved to New York for her career. She kept her things in the apartment, came and went when she wanted, never paid rent. I didn't ask, I didn't keep score. I told myself I was helping her get on her feet. I told myself this was temporary. And through all of it, I truly believed we had a good bond. Not perfect, but real, strong enough to survive distance, disagreements, and time. That belief is what made her choice hurt the most. When we were kids, it was always just the two of us against the world. I remember holding her hand on our walk to school, even when she pretended she didn't need it. I was the one who packed her lunches, checked her homework, and lied for her when she broke something and got scared. She followed me everywhere. If I was in my room, she was right outside the door. If I had a bad day, she knew before I said a word. After our parents died, that bond felt even tighter. We didn't talk about the pain much, but we felt it together. Late nights turned into quiet conversations on the living room floor. Sometimes we laughed over nothing. Sometimes we just sat there, sharing the silence because it was easier than being alone. I learned how to be strong for both of us, and she learned how to rely on that strength without ever questioning the cost. Growing up, people used to tell me she was lucky to have me. And I believed that was my role, to protect her, to cushion her falls, to make life easier where I could. When she messed up, I covered. When she doubted herself, I reminded her who she was. When she dreamed big, I cheered the loudest. I never saw it as one-sided back then. It just felt like love. That's why I never imagined a moment where she'd choose something else over me. Not because I expected her life to stop for mine, but because I believed, deep down, that when it really mattered, we'd show up for each other. That belief came from years of shared loss, shared space, and shared survival. We didn't always agree, but I thought our history meant something. I thought it protected us. Looking back, I realize I was holding onto the memory of who we used to be, not who we had become. When I told her my wedding date, there was a pause on the line. Not a normal pause. Not the kind where someone is processing happy news. It was the kind of silence that makes your stomach tighten before anything bad is even said. I remember gripping my phone a little harder, already bracing myself, even though I didn't know why. I filled the silence with nervous words, telling her about the venue, the flowers, and how long it took us to pick that exact date. She didn't interrupt me, she just listened. Then she sighed, soft at first, almost careful. And that's when she said it. She told me she had already booked a trip to Europe, non-refundable tickets, planned months ago. A once-in-a-lifetime experience she couldn't pass up. She said it like it was obvious. Like any reasonable person would understand why a vacation mattered more than a wedding. More than her sister's wedding. I laughed. I don't know why I laughed, but I did. That fake laugh people use when they don't want to make things awkward. I told her it was fine. I said, I get it. I even joked that she'd better bring me something nice back. My voice sounded steady, almost cheerful. If someone had been listening in, they would have thought I was completely okay with it. But the truth was, I wasn't. My chest felt tight, like I couldn't take a full breath. I reminded her, gently, that the dates had been finalized 3 months earlier. That everyone else had adjusted their lives to be there. She brushed it off, saying plans change and this trip was important for her growth. She didn't ask how I felt. She didn't apologize. She just kept talking about flights and cities and how badly she needed this break. After we hung up, I sat on my couch in silence. The apartment felt too quiet. My hands were shaking, and I didn't even realize it until my phone slipped out of my grip and hit the floor. I stared at it like it had betrayed me. That's when the tears came. Not loud ones, just slow, quiet tears that surprised me with how heavy they felt. I kept telling myself I was overreacting, that it was just one day, that siblings miss things sometimes. But deep down, I knew this was bigger than a scheduling conflict. It felt like a choice. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one being chosen. I kept waiting for her to reach out. I told myself she would call the morning of the wedding, or at least text, something simple, something small. I'm thinking of you. I'm proud of you. I wish I was there. I didn't need a speech. I didn't need guilt or explanations. I just needed to know I still mattered to her. But nothing came. The wedding day arrived, and my phone stayed quiet. No missed calls. No unread messages. I checked it more times than I'd ever admit to anyone. Every time it buzzed, my heart jumped, only to sink again when it was someone else. A friend, a cousin, a reminder notification, anyone but her. I got married surrounded by love, but there was a space that felt painfully empty. People smiled at me, hugged me, told me how beautiful everything was. And it was. It really was. But every time someone mentioned family, my chest tightened. I kept thinking about how she knew exactly what day this was. How she knew what it meant to me, and how she still chose not to say a word. Days passed, still nothing. That silence hurt more than her absence ever could, because absence can have excuses, silence doesn't. Silence is a decision. It meant she woke up every day, saw the date, and chose not to reach out. It meant she saw photos, probably knew the ceremony had happened, and still stayed quiet. That realization cut deeper than I expected. I started replaying our whole relationship in my head. Every time I'd covered for her. Every time I'd given more than I had. Every time I'd told myself, she doesn't mean it like that. I wondered how long I'd been excusing behavior that should have hurt me sooner. I wondered if I'd been holding on to a version of us that only existed in my head. What hurt the most wasn't that she missed my wedding. It was that she didn't care enough to pretend she wished she was there. No card, no call, no message. Just silence, cold and final. That's when something inside me shifted. I stopped crying. I stopped waiting. And I started feeling something else instead. A quiet anger. Not explosive, just steady. The kind that comes when you finally see things clearly and realize you've been the only one holding everything together. After the wedding, something in me snapped, not all at once. It was slow, like a crack spreading through glass. I went back to my normal routine, but nothing felt the same. Every room in the apartment reminded me of how much of my life I'd shared without ever asking for anything in return. Her boxes in the corner, her old clothes still hanging in the closet, her presence everywhere, even when she wasn't there. I started thinking about things I'd pushed aside for years: the apartment, the trust fund, the responsibility my mother placed on me without ever asking if I wanted it. She used to say, "You're the older one, you'll understand." And I did, I always did. I understood so much that I forgot to ask where that left me. Legally, everything was in my name. The apartment, the trust, I'd never used that fact against my sister. I'd split the money evenly, just like my mother would have wanted. I let her live there rent-free for years. Even after she moved to New York, she kept her room, her things, her access. I paid the bills, I handled repairs, I never asked her for a dime. And now she couldn't even send a text. The anger I felt wasn't about money. It was about respect. It was about realizing that I'd been carrying us both for so long that she'd stopped seeing it as something worth acknowledging. I wasn't her sister anymore. I was just something stable she could lean on whenever she needed. So I made a decision. I spoke to a lawyer, quietly, carefully. I asked questions I'd never allowed myself to ask before, and the answers were clear. The trust was mine. The apartment was mine. I didn't owe anyone an explanation for protecting what I'd been left with. I blocked her access to the trust. I sent a formal notice asking her to remove her belongings from the apartment. I calculated the years she'd lived there without paying rent. 10 years. I didn't even ask for all of it back. I just asked for accountability. For once, hitting send felt awful. My hands shook just like they had after that phone call months earlier. I cried afterward. Hard. Because even though it felt right, it also felt like I was officially letting go of the version of us I'd been holding onto my whole life. I wasn't trying to punish her. I was trying to stop punishing myself for always choosing peace over honesty, for always giving more than I could afford emotionally, for believing love meant silence. I told myself if she cared, she'd talk to me. If she didn't, then maybe this was the answer I'd been avoiding all along. My husband noticed the change in me before I said anything. I wasn't loud about it. I didn't rant or cry nonstop. I just went quiet in a way that scared even me. One night, after dinner, we sat on the couch in the apartment that suddenly felt heavier than it ever had before. The TV was on, but neither of us was watching it. He looked at me for a long moment, like he was choosing his words carefully. Then he asked me something simple. "Have you always been the one giving up?" The question hit me harder than any argument ever could. I opened my mouth to answer and realized I didn't know where to start. My whole life flashed through my head in pieces. Me being the responsible one, me being the understanding one, me being told, again and again, that I was strong enough to handle things. I felt tears fill my eyes before I could stop them. I told him everything. About my sister, about the trust, about the apartment, about the way my mother used to speak to me like I was an adult even when I was still a kid. I told him how guilty I felt for drawing a line, even though no one had ever thanked me for not drawing one before. I told him how afraid I was that I'd finally gone too far. He didn't interrupt me. He didn't rush to fix it. He just listened. And when I finished, he said something that stayed with me. He said, "You didn't take anything from her. You stopped letting her take from you." No one had ever framed it that way before. That night, for the first time, I didn't feel like the villain in my own story. I felt tired, deeply tired. But also lighter, like I'd finally put something down that I'd been carrying for years. I realized that love shouldn't feel like constant self-erasure. It shouldn't require silence to survive. I went to bed knowing one thing for sure. Whatever happened next, I wasn't going to apologize for protecting myself anymore. 3 days later, the pounding started. It was loud enough to shake the door, angry enough to make my heart race. I knew it was her before I even heard her voice. She was screaming my name like I'd committed some unforgivable crime. Neighbors' doors cracked open. Someone down the hall asked if everything was okay. I took a deep breath and opened the door. She stood there looking nothing like the version of herself I remembered. Her hair was messy. Her eyes were wild. She looked exhausted, furious, and completely out of control. The first thing she said wasn't hello. It wasn't congratulations. It was, "What did you do?" She shoved her phone in my face, showing emails from the bank, notices from the lawyer, messages she hadn't been able to reply to because I'd blocked her. She accused me of betraying her, of humiliating her, of choosing money over family. Her voice echoed through the hallway, and I felt strangely calm. For the first time, I didn't rush to explain myself. I didn't apologize just to end the fight. I asked her one question. Why didn't you come to my wedding? She froze, just for a second. Then she snapped back, saying I was being dramatic, that it was just one day. That I knew how important that trip was for her career and her life. That's when I told her the truth, that it wasn't the trip, it was the silence, the way she disappeared when it mattered, the way she'd taken without acknowledging the cost. I told her I'd been carrying our family on my back for years, quietly, without complaint. And I was done. That's when she finally said it. She admitted she didn't come because she felt resentful. Resentful that the apartment was in my name. Resentful that I was settled. Resentful that people saw me as responsible while she was still trying to prove herself. She said watching me get married in a home she felt should have been hers was too much. Hearing that hurt. But it also explained everything. She wasn't angry about the trust. She was angry that I'd stopped being the person she could lean on without consequences. She wasn't screaming because I was wrong. She was screaming because she'd lost control. When she finally left, the hallway was quiet again. And for the first time, so was my mind. That night, I sat alone in the apartment and thought about my mother. About the things she said out loud and the things she never did. She wanted me to take care of my sister, but she never meant for me to disappear in the process. I realized I'd misunderstood love for years. I thought it meant sacrifice without limits. I thought it meant silence. I thought it meant always being available. It doesn't. Love can be kind and still have boundaries. Family can matter without owning every piece of you. I didn't stop loving my sister that day. I just stopped letting that love cost me my peace. And that difference changed everything. I don't know what our relationship will look like in the future. Maybe we'll heal, maybe we won't. But I know this, I finally chose myself without guilt. And that choice didn't make me cold or selfish. It made me free. If you've ever been the strong one, the reliable one, the one who always gives and stays quiet so everyone else can be comfortable, this story is for you. You're allowed to set boundaries. You're allowed to choose yourself. And you're not wrong for doing it. Subscribe if you believe love should never require losing yourself.